both parties to come to the floor this afternoon to talk about the apparent bipartisan deal reached among Senate leaders to end the government shutdown and avert a financial default. That bill expected to head to the House for consideration sometime today, as the debt ceiling deadline is less than a day away. And now live to the floor of the U.S. Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order, and the Chaplain, retired Admiral Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer. Chaplain.
Let us pray. Eternal God, we're grateful that you are gracious and merciful, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. Lord, we see a faint light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. Thank you for lawmakers who understand that when everyone loses, America loses. We're grateful also for senators who know that before they are Democrat, Republican, or Independent, they are Americans. As they remember their accountability to you and to history, empower them to keep our nation strong, staying true to their oath to defend our Constitution against external and internal foes. Lord, keep them from making any decision that will seem reckless in the sober light of hindsight. We pray in your mighty name. Amen.
Please join me in pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Here, I'll give you the back. The Majority Leader.
Count number 211.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 211 S 1569, a bill to ensure the complete and timely payment of the obligations of the United States government until December 31st, 2014.
Following the remarks of the Republican leader and me, the Senate will be in a period of morning business where senators will be allowed to speak for up to 10 minutes each, or at least be in a situation where people can speak up for 10 minutes each. Mr. President, I'm going to wait until Senator McConnell gets to the floor, so I'm not going to give any long remarks here. In fact, I'm going to give you long remarks anytime, but I do have a few things to say. But while we're waiting for Senator McConnell, I haven't had the opportunity to say this. Admiral Black has, for me, during this long period of crisis we've had in the country, been a voice of stability, a voice of inspiration to me, and I'm being very selfish in saying me, that it's been for the entire Senate and for the country. His heartfelt prayers are so timely and so sensitive to the needs of our country and the need that we all have to call upon our spirituality to get us through periods of difficulty. I can speak for the entire Senate by saying how much we admire and respect this good man who is a counselor and a leader in the Senate as much as anyone that serves in this body. I know they have some quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
President,
The Majority Leader.
could we have order in the Senate?
The Senate is in a quorum call.
I would ask, thank you for reminding me of that also. I ask unanimous consent to call the quorum be terminated.
Without objection.
Madam President, the eyes of the world have been in Washington all this week, and that is a gross understatement. And while they witnessed a great deal of political discord, today they will also see Congress reach a historic bipartisan agreement to reopen the government and avert a default on the nation's bills. The compromise we reached will provide our economy with the stability it desperately needs. It's never easy for two sides to reach consensus. It's really hard, sometimes harder than others. This time was really hard. But after weeks spent facing off across a partisan divide that often seemed too wide to cross, our country came to the brink of a disaster. But in the end, political adversaries set aside their differences and disagreements to prevent that disaster. I thank the Republican leader for his diligent efforts to reach this important agreement. The Republican leader's cooperation was essential to reach an accord that could pass both chambers of Congress and also be signed by President Obama. As part of our agreement, in order to assure Congress continues the work of setting this country on a path of fiscal sustainability, this legislation instructs leaders to name conferees to a budget conference committee that will set our country on a long-term path to fiscal sustainability. Madam President, I know that some say that's going to be hard. But what we do is hard here, and this is really hard, but I think we can get it done. The committee members selected must have open minds, be willing to consider every option, no matter how painful to their own political ideas and even their own political parties. This conference committee, led by Chairman Murray and Chairman Ryan, which will produce its negotiated budget resolution in December, is the appropriate place to discuss our different views of the best way to chart a course for economic growth. This legislation also funds the government through January 15th and averts default through February 7th, during which time we can work toward a long-term budget agreement that prevents these frequent crises. And perhaps most importantly, this legislation ends a standoff to ground the work of Washington to a halt this fall. Madam President, this is not a time for pointing fingers of blame. This is a time of reconciliation. I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of this great Capitol to pass this remarkable agreement which will protect the long-term health of our economy and avert a default on our nation's debt and allow us to set a foundation for economic expansion. What we've done is send a message to Americans from every one of our 50 states, but in addition to that, to the citizens of every country in the world, that the United States lives up to its obligations. Now Congress must return to its most important job, fostering economic growth and protecting middle-class families. I appreciate through all this the steady hand of President Obama who helped guide us to this conclusion. I'm optimistic that the spirit of compromise that has taken root in the Senate over the last 2 days will endure. I do know this. Senator McConnell and I have sat in very, very serious discussions the last few days. We're going to do everything we can to change the atmosphere in the Senate and accomplish things that need to be done for our country.
Madam President.
The Republican Leader.
This has been a long, challenging few weeks for Congress and for the country. It's my hope that today we can put some of those most urgent issues behind us. After yesterday's events, the Majority Leader and I began a series of conversations about a way to get the government reopened and to prevent default. I'm confident we'll be able to do both those things later today. Crucially, I'm also confident that we'll be able to announce that we're protecting the government spending reductions that both parties agreed to under the Budget Control Act and that the President signed into law. That's been a top priority for me and for my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle throughout this debate, and it's been worth the effort. Some have suggested that we break that promise as part of this agreement. Some have said Washington needs to spend more, that we need to raise taxes, that we need to just tax our way to prosperity and balance. But what the BCA showed is that Washington actually can cut spending. And because of this law, that's just what we've done. For the first time since the Korean War, government spending has declined for 2 years in a row, the first time in 50 years. And we're not going back on this agreement. There's a lot more we need to do to get our nation's fiscal house in order. Hopefully, once we've gotten past the drama of the moment, we can get to work on it. But for now, let's not understate the importance of the Budget Control Act or the importance of the fight to preserve it. This legislation is the largest spending reduction bill of the last quarter century and the largest deficit reduction bill since 1981 that didn't include a tax hike. Preserving this law is critically important to the future of our country. Throughout this debate, the public has rightly focused on Obamacare, for good reason. This law is ravaging our economy, killing jobs, driving up premiums, and driving people off the health care plans they have and like in droves. Its disastrous rollout is a sign of even worse things to come. And the refusal to delay it reflects a kind of stubborn ideological obsession that will do untold damage to our country. And Republicans remain determined to repeal this terrible law. But for today, the relief we hope for is to reopen the government, avoid default, and protect the historic cuts we achieved under the Budget Control Act. This is far less than many of us had hoped for, frankly, but it's far better than what some had sought. Now it's time for Republicans to unite behind other crucial goals. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, senators are permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Madam President.
Senator from Arkansas.
Madam President, I had not intended to speak right now. I know that the leaders are working on trying to get the process clear so that we can move this legislation forward. But I do want to mention a few of my colleagues that really helped in this process. We had a number of Democrats and a number of Republicans that met together and talked to try to come to a resolution on a package that we wanted to present to the leaders. And in fact, the structure of what the two leaders have agreed on is very similar to what we had proposed to them. And I see some of my colleagues here today who were instrumental. I see the senator from Alaska, Senator Murkowski, and I know that Senator Ayotte is here, as well as Senator Flake, who happens to be in the chamber right now, and Senator Kirk, and Senators Johans and McCain, and of course Senator Collins. Senator Collins really led the effort and spearheaded the effort, and she deserves a lot of credit for getting us together and helping to move the ball down the field. Madam President, I hadn't planned on controlling the floor right now or even talking about this very much, but since we have the opportunity, I know that we, on our side of the aisle, we have Senator Manchin, Senator Klobuchar, Senator King, Senator Donnelly, and Senator Heitkamp that all play just a critical role in this. And again, this had not been planned by anyone. It's just that it looks like we have a little bit of a time here. And I also forgot Senator Shaheen, who's not here on the floor right now. But if it's agreeable, what I'd like to do is yield to one of my colleagues if they want to say a word about the agreement that we reached or that we were working on to try to present to the leaders, and just really say, Thank you to Senator Collins, and thank you for all 14 of us. It turns out we had 7 Republicans, 6 Democrats, and 1 independent.
Speak now.
And basically what we try to do is just try to come up with a sensible framework that the leaders could use to get us to where we are today. Again, they didn't accept every single thing we wanted, but the framework was good, and certainly it was great to see everyone work together. And Madam President, I see the Senator from Arizona maybe would like to say a word. So before I turn it over to him, I'd just like to thank him because he was great and very instrumental in moving this ball down the field.
Madam President.
The Senator from Arizona.
I think it's obvious that we are now seeing the end of this agonizing odyssey that this body has been put through, but far more importantly, the American people have been put through. It's one of the more shameful chapters that I have seen in the years that I have spent here in the Senate. But I would like to say that if there's a good outcome, it is the fact that 14 of us were able to join together, Republican and Democrat. Leadership, I must fully admit, was provided primarily by women in the Senate. I won't comment further on that. But seriously, 14 of us got together. We came up with a plan that, after very spirited discussion, and that plan, I think, was probably better than the one that we are going to act on today. But the fact is that this group of 14 people are committed to staying together, to address other issues of importance, and to tell the American people that there are at least 14 of us, and there are many others who wanted to join that group and who are welcome to join that group, that we are going to not let this kind of partisanship cripple this body and injure the American people. And I'm proud to have worked with my I'm proud to have worked with the members from the other side and on my side of the aisle. And this isn't the last crisis that we are going to go through, but I think we have the framework for the kind of bipartisanship that the American people need and want. So I thank them. I look forward to working with them in the future, and I also enjoyed the spirited discussions that we had. And I want to thank especially my friend from Maine who enriched me with a small side wager that we made during the course of this discussion. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The Senator from Minnesota.
Madam President, I thank the Senator from Arizona. He brought a very experienced voice to our group, and especially I want to thank Senator Collins for bringing this group together. I think it shows what courage is going to be in the next year in this chamber and in the Congress. It's not going to just be standing here by yourself making a speech with no one there. Courage is going to be whether or not you're willing to stand next to someone you don't always agree with for the betterment of this country. This was very close to another default, to seeing what we saw in 2011 with the Dow down 2,000 points, household wealth down over $2 trillion. That just can't happen again. Thanks to our leader, Senator Reid, thanks to his work with Senator McConnell, we averted this time. And I think you will find a strong bipartisan vote in the Senate for this compromise, for this idea of paying our bills, opening the government again, and making sure that we have a reasonable time period to work out a solution long term. And that is our challenge. Yes, we've averted this crisis, but we need to stop having these crises. We need to actually come up with a long-term solution in a balanced way that brings down our debt, while at the same time doing it in a way that won't start another financial crisis. So I want to thank my colleagues for their amazing work, for their good humor during a very difficult time, and for the fact that we are finally moving forward and ending the brinkmanship. Thank you, Madam President. And I see my friend, the Senator from Alaska, is here.
Madam President.
The Senator from Alaska.
Again, I join my colleague, Senator Pryor. I don't think that any of us had planned to do anything coordinated at this point in time. I just came to the floor and was anticipating the announcement from both leadership, but to see so many of our colleagues who have been working on this proposal, that Senator Collins from Maine, who has truly been, I think, remarkable in her persistence and insistence that we continue this effort to work collegially, to work collaboratively on these very, very difficult issues that we have been facing in these past several weeks. So to Senator Collins for her leadership most particularly. But we all know if you're just trying to move the ball, just one person, you don't get anywhere. We do a lot of sports analogies around here, and quite honestly, I am really tired of sports analogies. But what I do appreciate is that as a Senate, we cannot work together as individuals and expect to accomplish the work that is needed not only for my constituents in Alaska, but around the country. And regardless of who's in the majority or who's in the minority, in order to make it work for the country, we've got to be working together. And so as difficult as all this has been in the past several weeks, the thing that I have found encouraging is that there have been a nucleus of folks who would come together as the need arose, or perhaps just for a little moral support, and continue the effort to try to find common ground. We went from a small group to a group of 6 on each side to a group of 7 on each side, and I think with every passing day we had more colleagues that were interested in helping and participating to try to find that common ground. And as we've noted, the agreement that has been reached by our respective leaderships, well, it's not what our working group came up with. There are certain elements of it that we had helped to shepherd. But this should not be about who claims authorship, who puts their name behind it. What this should be about is whether or not we can get the government open again, we can get focused on dealing with our fiscal issues, dealing with the fact that we're up against a debt ceiling perhaps tomorrow. Our reality is in front of us right now. So getting caught up with whether it's the Senate that should make this happen or the House that makes this happen, whether it's Leader Reid or the minority member McConnell, that's not what the public really cares about. The news that's coming out today is that there's a deal. There's a deal. And that deal should give America hope. But it doesn't get us out of the mess that we're in. I think that we're still at pretty low approval ratings. It's going to take a while for us to rebuild any credibility. But I think that the effort to rebuild credibility begins when we honestly and earnestly roll up our sleeves, tackle the big problems, recognize that we have to do it together rather than to retreat into our respective corners and just hope that we can get it right without talking to one another. So again, I thank Senator Collins for her leadership on this issue, and I thank all my colleagues on the Democrat side of the aisle, the Republican side of the aisle, for coming to this point, and I am most hopeful that we will see quick resolve today so that the country can breathe easily and sleep a little bit better tonight. With that, Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Indiana.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Senator Collins, who helped lead our group, Senator Pryor, Senator Manchin, and so many others who helped lead our group as well. This was not Democrats and Republicans. This was Americans who were sent here to serve our country. I am blessed to come from the state of Indiana, and they gave me this great honor to serve here. And I know precisely why they sent me here, which is to do the work of the nation, to protect our nation, to not worry about Republican or Democrat, but to do what is right. And I take that charge very, very seriously, and that's why I worked with my colleagues here, was to see, is there a way we can help bring an agreement closer, bring an agreement together that protects our credit ratings, that protects our financial situation, and that protects our country. And so I was very lucky to be part of such an extraordinary group of partners in this effort. I want to thank all of them, and as the senator from Alaska was saying, we have a lot more work to do, as all the senators know. And so we stand ready to, on whatever front our nation needs us, to do that kind of work. That's not Democrat work, that's not Republican work, but that's American work to move our nation and our country forward. Thank you very much.
The senator from Maine.
Madam President, later today, the Senate is likely to consider legislation that would reopen government, avert the default, and put us on a long-term path to come up with a plan to deal with our unsustainable $17 trillion national debt by reopening the long overdue budget negotiations. And I hope my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will support the plan that has been put forth by our two leaders, Senator Reid and Senator McConnell. I'm pleased, Madam President, that elements of the compromise that the two leaders have worked out have been taken from a plan that was developed by 14 senators who have worked very hard on both sides of the aisle. 7 Democrats, actually 6 Democrats, and 1 independent, the senator from Maine, 7 Republicans who have come together in good faith and have worked very hard over the last 2 weeks to put together a compromise plan that I have to say I actually prefer to that which we will vote on later today. But elements of our plan have been incorporated into the plan that the two leaders have presented for our consideration. This was truly a collaborative effort, and I want to make sure that all of my colleagues who worked so hard on it receive the kudos that they deserve for being willing to do what this body does too rarely, and that is for both sides to get together, come out of our partisan corners, stop fighting, and start legislating. This great country deserves a Congress that can govern. And that was the unifying theme of our group. On October 5th, a Saturday when we were in session and the shutdown was in its early days, I was sitting in my Senate office watching the floor debate, and I was disheartened by what I heard, because what I heard were partisan speeches from both sides of the aisle and no one offering a path forward. I decided then and there to chart out, to outline a possible plan to end this impasse. And I marched over to the Senate floor and gave a speech in which I urged our colleagues to work together. Well, virtually immediately, I heard from colleagues on both sides of the aisle who wanted to be part of that effort and who have worked night and day to try to come up with a plan that I believe helped lay the foundation for the ultimate compromise reached by our two leaders. Senator Murkowski and Senator Ayotte were the first two members to call me up. Now, I know that my colleagues are tired of hearing about the women in the Senate, but the fact is they were the first two to contact me. Senator Joe Manchin was the first person on the Democratic side to call and say, count me in. I want to work on this as well. Senator Pryor and Senator King also very early on, and Senator McCain endorsed the proposal of our working together in the outlines of this plan. Senator Johans was such a thoughtful addition to our group. Amy Klobuchar was there for every meeting. Senator Kirk, Senator Heidi Heitkamp, Senator Jeff Flake, Senator Joe Donnelly, Senator Jean Shaheen. It was a wonderful group of people united by our determination to demonstrate that we could compromise, we could govern, we could bring an end to this impasse and do it in a way that was worthy of this great country and our constituents. We worked together over and over. There were a lot of tough decisions to be made, a lot of lengthy negotiations, and we came up with a plan which we presented to our two leaders, Senator Reid and Senator McConnell. Not all elements of our plan were incorporated by the leaders, but I think that they would say that they built on our work and did indeed take some of our provisions verbatim. I continue to believe that our plan was a great path forward, but I am pleased that it paved the way to what I hope will be a solution to the impasse that we have been facing, that has been so unfair to the American people and has hurt so many people. And, Madam President, I think it's important for us to remember that the damage goes beyond the hundreds of thousands of furloughed federal workers through no fault of their own. It goes beyond the damage to the private sector employees who lost business because of the closure of our parks. It goes beyond the damage to our disabled veterans who have had to wait for their claims to be handled. It goes beyond the anxiety that many who are dependent on very important federal programs, the most vulnerable in our society. It goes beyond the impact on our national defense, although we were able to mitigate that to some extent. It goes to something far more fundamental, and that is whether the people of this country can have confidence in our ability to put aside partisan politics and act as patriots committed to doing what is right for our nation. And I want to thank the 13 senators who joined with me, who worked so hard and who did just that. They left their partisanship at the door and they negotiated as real patriots who cared about America. So I thank them all. It's been a great pleasure to work with each and every one of them. All of them contributed so much to the bipartisan plan that we presented, and I am glad that it has helped to bring us to what I hope is an end to a very unfortunate chapter in America's history. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President.
The senator from West Virginia.
I too rise very proudly to be part of a group that truly that I watch put their country first. And I've been here probably a shorter period of time than most of my colleagues, but not quite 3 years. And I think people know that I've been a little bit frustrated at times, if not sometimes quite frustrated. But I've heard the stories of how the Senate used to work. And when the going got tough, the senators really got going. I hadn't seen that too much in the last 3 years, so seeing a group of a dichotomy of senators coming from my dear friend Angus King, an independent coming from Maine, and then we had 7 Republicans led by Senator Collins and our Democratic colleagues here. So coming together and playing off of each other's strengths. It wasn't playing off of egos at all. And 2 weeks ago, I could not believe of the self-inflicted pain that was put upon the people of America by this Congress by shutting it down. And also coming on the brink of forfeiture, of a financial calamity, if you will, being able not to pay our bills. And I've said, I've watched people get into financial problems before. I've watched businesses and individuals. And financial problems come to you in many ways, but basically, sometimes you have early warnings, and you can step in front of that and restructure your spending, you can restructure your habits, and get yourself whole again. It takes a while. Or you can wait until it hits you, and then foreclosure comes, bankruptcy comes, and it's almost impossible to work yourself out of it. This was really congressional made. There might be a time when we have pressures put upon us as a country that we're going to have to do extraordinary things to keep ourselves afloat, but this is not one. And it shouldn't be made because of the political dysfunction. So when I saw every one of our colleagues playing off.
Order, please.
When I saw our colleagues playing off of the strengths that each person brought to that group, and it got stronger and stronger as each day when we faced the shutdown that we thought was absolutely ridiculous and unnecessary, should never happen, and then we were looking at facing financial meltdown, if you will, the insolvency of our country, and that could not be tolerated. And as each person played off of each other to try to help and make this come together, and I think Senator Collins explained it so well, that we were able to have a piece of agreed-upon legislation that had a tremendous framework and a good template that was presented to both of our leaderships on the Senate side as far as the Republican and on the Democrat side. And I applaud both of our leaders, Reid and Senator Reid and Senator McConnell, for taking that constructively and working with it and trying to make the best possible piece of legislation that we believe and we encourage our colleagues on the other side of the House to accept. I'm hopeful for a large vote in the Senate. I'm very much hopeful for that. I'm hopeful that our colleagues on the House will accept that in the spirit of a bipartisan agreement that we worked on. And we considered the House when we were doing this, what would be acceptable and palatable, but also, more importantly, we basically took into consideration the American people of what they wanted us to do and sent us here to do. So in the spirit of the Senate, that I'm proud to see the Senate be able to rise for the occasion and work the way I heard it used to work. I was able to experience this in the last 2 weeks, and I'm proud to have been a part of that. I want to thank all of my colleagues on both the Republican side and the Senate on the House side. This is truly a time when America rose to show its best. Now we just got to make sure we complete this. And with this bill, I will say this, the thing that we kept finding out why we could not come to a budget conference, this bill will have a mandatory budget conference that has to report back and go back to some regular order. That was very important for all of us to agree upon. And the timing, everybody said there will be some criticism, well, such a short time. We've got a better framework than we've ever had right now in order to fix and repair the damage that has been done, but the uncertainty that's lurking if we don't do something. So I'm very pleased and proud again. I want to thank Senator Collins and Senator Murkowski, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Pryor. All of them are here, Senator King, Senator Heitkamp, everybody that's worked so hard to make this happen, and all my other colleagues. And again, just proud to be a part of an extraordinary group of people that really put the country before themselves. Thank you, Madam.
Madam President. The Senator from North Dakota.
I rise today to tell you that about 5 days ago, I was wondering why I came to the United States Senate. I had the same belief that the American people had. This is a place that no longer is functioning. This is a place that it seems like we're just locked in gridlock and not able to get things done. And then an amazing thing happened. Under the leadership of some very strong and senior members, a group came together to have a broader discussion. A discussion, as we called it, the Plan B, the potential of being able to present some ideas that could, in fact, find their way towards compromise. And that under the strong leadership of Senator Collins, under the invitation of the great senator from Alaska, Lisa Murkowski, we were able to bring people together and begin those discussions, begin the dialogue that really, I think, had an opportunity to present a template for resolution. And today, we're doing something that the American people have waited 16 days, doing the responsible thing, opening up government, extending our debt limit, and doing regular order. No more special committees. No more do we have the super committee and have the hopes on a Bowles-Simpson commission or a Rivlin commission. We are going to make this body function again. And I think we have a lot of great hope that our colleagues, our colleague Patty Murray and ranking member Senator Sessions from Alabama will meet with their House counterparts in principled negotiations and discussions that will once again tell the American people we're serious about doing their bidding and their business. The proof now is in the pudding. We have taken what little confidence the American public had in this institution and our institution in the United States Congress and once again shook it. And it is time that we bring that confidence back. And there's no better time than fulfilling the promise and the commitment of this agreement today and getting back to regular order. And so, Madam President, I want to thank all of the colleagues, Senator Manchin, Senator Angus King from Maine, Mark Pryor, Arkansas, who was instrumental in getting me to run for the United States Senate. I occasionally remind him of that. Mark and I were attorneys general together, but I know that across the aisle in so many great opportunities to have conversations that I think bore fruit today, but I think will continue to flourish and thrive and provide opportunity for more bipartisan compromise. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President, oh, excuse me, I'll defer. You were here first, Senator. You go ahead.
Thank you.
I didn't see you.
Madam President.
The senator from Maine.
Winston Churchill once famously observed that Americans will always do the right thing, only after they have tried everything else. I think the last 2 weeks demonstrates the wisdom of that observation. I want to join my colleagues in congratulating first the leaders for putting aside their substantial differences, their substantial partisan divide, to meet together over the last 2 or 3 days and hammer out an agreement that is not going to be acceptable or exciting to anyone, but will in fact put America back together in terms of our government functioning, avoiding the threat of default, and allowing us to move forward with the nation's problems. So my first congratulations is to Senator Harry Reid and Senator Mitch McConnell for coming together as they have in the last 24 hours. I also have to really acknowledge the leadership of my senior colleague from Maine, Susan Collins. It was her, I happened to be presiding the day that she made her speech last Saturday, and it was really her initiative to stand up and take a risk and say, let's try to work something out. And she outlined a beginning of a framework, which was then fleshed out over the last 10 days of discussions among the group that we've been talking about. And I was interviewed recently on the radio, and somebody said, well, don't you think Senator Collins may be subject to some criticism from some quarter or another about her role in all of this? And I paused for a minute and I said, that's what leadership is. It's the willingness to bear criticism, to stick your neck out. As my dad used to say, he's like the turtle crossing the road. The only way the turtle can cross the road is to stick his neck out. And that's what we're trying to do on behalf of the American people. I see that Senator Patty Murray is not on the floor right now, but I am so glad that we are now entering into a process where she and her colleagues on the Budget Committee will be able to work with Congressman Ryan and try to really solve some of these issues that have been plaguing us so severely. And we're doing it as we should in the proper process. So I'm delighted that Senator Murray is now going to step into this role, which is one of the most important that we've had in recent years, and we'll be able to work toward a resolution. This is an important and perhaps historic compromise where Congress was really looking into the abyss, where Congress was really proving that it could not function and our system could not function in the divided politics of America today. It now appears that our leaders have pulled us back from that abyss and given us an opportunity, not a guarantee, but an opportunity to continue the discussions that started with this terrible shutdown and will give us the opportunity to try to bring our country together and to resolve the problems that we face. It's a shame that we've spent so much time doing what I think is the obvious: run the government, pay our bills. But now that we've seemed to have passed through this moment, now we can move forward into the long-term challenges of our budgets, of the challenges facing our people, our ability to solve problems, and proof once again that this wonderful Constitution that has been bequeathed to us can still function, can still produce results, can still govern this country. Abraham Lincoln said that we can't escape history. We can't escape history, and this morning the chaplain's prayer talked about being accountable to history. And that indeed is what we are doing in this body, and I hope that history will judge today as a moment where the beginning of a new era of cooperation and civility and problem solving, not the loss of our differences, not the papering over of legitimate arguments of principle, but at least the ability to try to work together, to talk to each other, to respect one another, to listen to one another. Those are the essential qualities of leadership that I believe we're seeing demonstrated today, and I hope that it is a beginning, and I want to congratulate and thank all my colleagues, but especially the two leaders for getting us to this moment. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Arkansas.
Madam President, I would just like to say a few more words. And when we were